I'm standing in the Garter throne room on the visitor route at Windsor Castle. And in this room we have a portrait by Sir James Gunn. It's a portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, our Queen. The portrait that was made to commemorate her coronation, which took place on the 2nd of June in 1953. And when we see a portrait like this in Windsor Castle, it's very much at home, because here in the castle we have many, many portraits of monarchs throughout the ages, going back to Henry VIII, the famous Holbein image. And then we also have on display portraits of James I, Charles I, George IV, Queen Victoria, and here the Queen. When we look at an image like this, I think sometimes it's worthwhile asking a few questions. And when I think about royal portraiture in general, I like to think what the artist was intending us to think about the person who's being portrayed. And when it's an image of a previous monarch from history, such as Henry VIII, we can often learn a lot about history through royal portraiture. But I think it's very different when we're looking at something like this, a portrait of somebody who is so very familiar to us, the Queen, portrayed in her coronation robes. When we see her face, it's a face that we know so well, that actually the artist, Sir James Gunn, wasn't having to give us a portrait that presented the identity of the monarch in an identifiable way, because we know what the Queen looks like. So instead, the artist here is giving us symbols that help us to understand something about the monarch, that help us to understand the artist's point of view in portraying her. So let's look at those symbols. The way that the Queen is portrayed, she is presented in a very formal setting. The setting in the portrait is the throne room of Buckingham Palace. And to the left of the portrait, we see very clearly a theatrical curtain setting the scene. So often in royal portraiture, there is a curtain, which sort of gives that dramatic effect. To the right of the portrait is the throne. This is one of the official thrones that was made for the coronation service for Queen Elizabeth II. She is standing with her hand resting on a table and holding a scepter. And next to the scepter is the imperial state crown. She is wearing the coronation dress and the purple velvet robe of estate, so the clothes in which she attended the coronation service. And the dress itself is full of symbolism. This dress was designed by Norman Hartnell, and he was the designer who also created the Queen's wedding dress. So a favourite choice of the monarchs, perhaps. But here, Norman Hartnell designed a dress that was full of symbolism. The dress itself is very elegant. It's a satin, and it is embroidered with various details, using coloured threads and threads of silver and gold. And the designs that we see are very pertinent to the Queen and to her reign, because they show symbols of the nation and of the Commonwealth. In particular, we can see the shamrock of Ireland, the thistle of Scotland, the rose of England, and the daffodil of Wales. Around the Queen's shoulders, she wears the collar and the badge of the Order of the Garter, which is great for this setting here in the Garter throne room. And then on her head, she wears the diamond diadem. This was the diadem of King George IV. It's very fitting, but it's also very elegant. So on the table, we have the very heavy imperial state crown, but she wears the lighter, almost more feminine diadem, which was designed for George IV originally. So this is the symbolism of the painting. I think this is the background to why such a painting is made. A state portrait is intended to personify the reign of a particular monarch. And in this age of multimedia, we are so familiar with the Queen's image, with the Queen's face, but we're perhaps not as familiar with the symbols that go along with monarchy. And so it's quite interesting for us to be able to decipher them and to read a portrait like this. It's quite a serious portrait. State portraiture is serious. but there is this edge of glamour to it as well, and it's very appealing. It's the sort of painting that stands the test of time, so that it can take its place here at Windsor Castle among the group of all the other portraits of monarchs through the ages, so that we can identify, yes, this is Queen Elizabeth II, and we can see her beauty, we can see her grace shining out from a very fine portrait.